Hello, everyone. This is the panel on where to start watching classic Doctor Who. I've been running this panel since the beginning of the con, actually, how many years ago? 25, 30 years ago, however long we've been doing the convention. And I always love doing it. It's one of my favorite things to do here. Why don't we start to go around, introduce everybody else on the panel. We'll start with Gabby, since she's on my screen. She's directly to my right here.
Hi, I'm Gabby Santiago. I'm a writer and performer and big ol' Doctor Who fan. My friends got me into New Who with a curated list of episodes all about body horror, just the most body horror possible, and I was hooked. And then when I ran out of that, I started in on Sarah Jane Adventures and Classic Who.
How about Jeff? Introduce yourself, Jeff.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Elston. I am a lifelong Doctor Who fan. I've been watching it since, I don't know the exact year because I was so young, but sometime in kind of the mid to late 80s. Grew up on classic Doctor Who and have been with it ever since. So the TV movie, which we did a panel on earlier today, so be sure to check that out if it was recorded. Right up to the new series and all the spin-offs. So yeah, excited to be here talking about classic Doctor Who today because it's always going to have a special place in my heart.
And Bill, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm Bill Evenson. I know. I've been watching Doctor Who for longer than Jeff. I started watching in the early 80s, probably. And so, yeah, my heart is with the classic series. And that's about it.
I think I have both of you guys beat because my earliest TV memory is watching 1975.
Wow.
The last 5 minutes of Seeds of Doom with the giant plant monster, the Crinoid, destroying the mansion.
Was that here in somewhere in Minnesota, or where was that you were watching?
Yeah, it was, as far as I can tell. I was 5, so it's hard to remember, but I think KSTP ran the first, or I guess it would be whatever season that was of Tom Baker, just for that 3-month period that it was on. And then it disappeared again. And I would ask friends about it, and they never have any idea what I was talking about because no one else had watched it. And then PBS started the series in the early 80s, which I guess is probably where YouTube popped on. And most, like my wife and most everyone else I know that got into the series in the early 80s was when public television started doing it.
Awesome.
And then I was like, oh, see, I wasn't making it up. It's real.
So you'd recommend starting to watch the show by watching the last 5 minutes of Seeds of Doom, then?
Yeah, of any random show, really. Just watch the last 5 minutes of anything. No. Well, that is a good question, though. I mean, that's always a
Don't forget Marcia.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just jump in here and introduce myself.
Please, Jeff.
My name's Marcia Franklin. I have been blogging about Doctor Who on Confessions of a Neo-Whovian since 2011. I started watching Doctor Who in 2008 with the new series, and as soon as I got caught up with everything through Series 4 at the time was what had just finished airing, I went back and started from the beginning as much as I could and watched everything that was out on DVD at the time. So I started from the very, very beginning, but I also have opinions about where any given person should start. So
yeah,
Everybody's different.
So you started at Hartnell's first one.
Yes, I started with An Unearthly Child.
Yeah.
Well, and I think we've got, so Chris, you said it was about 75. Bill, it was early 80s. Me, it was sort of mid to late 80s. Marcia, you were 2008, and then Gabby, when did you start watching?
I think it was 2007. It was, yeah.
Oh, so right before Marcia. Okay, but right around the same time. Okay, so in the heat of the new series is when you both started watching. So that's good to know, to level set where we're all kind of coming from and how we all started. So that's cool.
Right.
And I think your guys' experience coming from the new series to the old series that's really interesting for me, because I had the exact opposite thing, where coming to the new series, I had expectations of what the new series should be like. And I would imagine that you guys had expectations of what Doctor Who should be like, as you know, maybe expecting something that was more modern in tone or.
See, everybody warned me about Classic Who, and that just made everything great, because I was like, wait, girls aren't breaking their ankle every 20 minutes. These are all great. Barbara's driving a truck over a Dalek.
Yeah.
He's shooting up a Dalek with a baseball bat. Leela's stabbing robots. Like, I don't know what classic series y'all were watching, but I love it. So, like, I kind of went in with kind of lowered expectations, but it worked out well.
I think Dr. Classic Who didn't always do the best job by its female characters, but it did a lot better than, you know, like classic Star Trek, the way Uhura was, you know, maybe minimized a lot of times.
I think there's this thing in fan memory too, where women's contributions are often erased or forgotten. There's Joanna Russ's book, How to Suppress Women's Writing. And, you know, there's definitely always been struggles for women in writing and performing and things like that. But also, there have been a lot of pioneers who did a lot of incredible work, but then they just don't get anthologized, or something about the fandom history just doesn't capture them. So I think it's nice to know that, you know, like, we don't have to reinvent the wheel with the new Who companions. There's always been strong female characters in Who.
I think a lot of credit has to go to Verity Lambert for being the first producer on the series too, and helping set a tone of you know, what the expectations should be like for the characters.
Yeah, the photo of her lighting her cigarette on that monster, iconic.
Yeah, I grew up. I'm roughly of an age with the guys who started watching it in the 70s and 80s. So I grew up with the kind of television production values that we get in some of the classic stuff. So it didn't put me off in the same way, because it's just like, this is how it was at the time. And I've found that for the things that were older than I was, the you know, the black and white era, it helped me to think of it more as a recording of live theater, which is kind of effectively what it was. So if I could go into it with that mindset, instead of thinking of it as, you know, this is television and this is how television should be, it was easier for me to digest it that way, because I had different expectations that this is not going to be like the stuff that I just started watching.
Yeah. I mean, when you go back all the way to 1963, the television was still very, very new then. As a popular medium, I think it was maybe 10 years old. And a lot of shows in the 50s, you know, really were just film theater. That was the best that they could do at the time. And so the production values that they were able to get to, even up to, you know, the level of An Unearthly Child, you know, it wasn't very high. So you really have to bring a lot of your own imagination to it, and meet them halfway. Do you guys have a particular episode that you would recommend that someone start with? I guess from the classic series in general, and then I think it might be interesting to go through each of the classic Doctors and see if we can find a pinpoint. I've got my own opinions, but let's hear yours. Why don't we start with? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
I don't have a particular episode, but I do generally recommend by companions, because I think especially if you're coming from New Who, one of the biggest barriers is pacing. Like, modern television, as you know, has like changed so much, and it's just very fast paced. You don't hold a shot for more than 2 seconds.
Yeah.
There's an episode of Doctor Who where you pan down a beach for like 3 minutes. So if you're coming to classic Who, if you've read Lord of the Rings, you're probably fine. But I think something that can help you kind of adjust to that slower pace is having a really action-y companion. So, you know, maybe the shot is going to be held for 3 minutes, but at the end of it, Leela's going to stab somebody. And you can just hold that in your heart while you wait for that to happen. So I really recommend people start with Leela or Ace or another really action-y companion.
I love the idea of holding in your heart the fact that Leela's about to stab someone. Like that's I don't know if that says something about you or us that I love it or what, but that's great. I love it.
I kind of think in some ways, somebody like Joe or Sarah Jane they're almost the stereotypical model of a Doctor Who companion nowadays, where you've got Rose and, you know, the model of, it's not that way, you know, right now with 13, but model of the Doctor traveling with another, just one other companion. That really started with Joe, and in some ways that's like the modern set. But if you go back to Hartnell, he's got a family traveling with him.
Yeah, and I think it depends on, you know, who you're showing it to, because some people might be, you know, fans of classic films and have zero problem, you know, with black and white material, for example, or you know, to your point, Gabby, like maybe are more okay with serialized TV that, you know, was meant to be seen 25 minutes at a time once a week. So when you sit down and watch it all at once, it can feel like a slog. But then also consider, like, maybe only literally show them one episode at a time, you know, maybe not once a week, but like one a day or something like that. So, you know, as I think about, you know, I've been a fan for such a long time, like, it hurts my heart a little bit to not think about starting at the very beginning. That's also the completionist in me, but I realize that won't, you know, jive for everyone. I think, you know, thinking of at least the Hartnell era, like somewhere like the Dalek Invasion of Earth or the Rescue, you know, that comes right after it, are good jumping on points. One, because it's the departure of a companion. So to your point, Gabby, you kind of get this idea like, okay, so companions are transitory, like they're going to change. So then this one's leaving. You won't necessarily feel the emotional blow, but you'll see the Daleks, you'll see an Earth invasion story. You'll get through, like, this is what serialized television was like. So it's 6 episodes long. And then immediately after that, you have the Rescue, which is only 2 episodes. So you don't have all the padding stuff. You get a new introduction with a new companion who is, I would say in some ways, allowed to do more than Susan ever was, because she was, you know, she got her one sort of outing with more than just kind of screaming in the Sensorites, and then she was sort of relegated to just being the Doctor's granddaughter, which is, you know, ultimately why the actress chose to leave. But so I think those could be good jumping on points for someone who's okay with the sort of black and white material and longer stories. I think what you said, Chris, about jumping on with maybe a Joe Grant story, and you could say Terror of the Autons, because that was not a reboot in any way, but certainly you know, you have a new companion, you have a new, it was a very different vibe than season 7, which is great, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it as a jumping on point, because it is so different from really certainly any other Pertwee and the rest of the show, really. So good TV, but if you're wanting them to like all of Doctor Who and they only like season 7, then they might be in for a surprise when it gets to season 8 or season 13 or whatever. So if they have more, you know, modern proclivities, I think you're right, Gabby, like a Leela, an Ace. I'm partial to the 5th Doctor era myself, and that replicates a little bit of the Hartnell era in terms of having a crowded TARDIS and 3 companions. So you get more variety in, you know, who you're watching. So yeah, I think to me, like, knowing who your audience is important to figuring out, like, okay, if you don't like black and white, I won't try to make you start with black and white. If you, you know, are partial to certain types of characters, I'll try to find something that aligns with that type of character. So at least there's something to, like, grab you, like, from the jump, rather than, like, feeling like you have to know all the ins and outs right away, because you're not going to. So I think knowing who they are and what they like at least a little bit will help you figure out the best place to start.
I think another good argument for starting with Terror of the Autons is that stretch from there to the rest of the end of Pertwee is just really solidly consistent in tone. You know what you're going to get. And it's all, you know, there's a couple clunkers in there, but it's all generally pretty good Doctor Who, too. We have a question from Bruce listening. To flip things around, do you have a personal definitive don't start? Which I I definitely do. I don't think you should start with the Sixth Doctor period, just because the quality of that. Maybe start with almost any other period, and you'll get generally better stuff.
Doing their best. Terrible,
flipping from a different perspective, don't start with the Fifth Doctor, not because the shows are bad, but because it's so heavy on previous continuity. It expects you to have been following along with the previous couple of seasons with the introduction of all the new companions at the time. That was a very full TARDIS too, because there were 3 companions. And it's not that they're bad shows, it's just that you are expected to know who Tegan is and Nyssa is and Adric is, and things develop pretty quickly from there. So it might be better to start earlier, maybe even just a season earlier, and catch up that way. Maybe we should hop back to the previous question though, because I don't know if everyone got a chance to answer that. Marcia, did you have a chance to talk about your favorite first episode?
No, because I'm in complete agreement with Jeff that it depends on who you're trying to start. And I've seen so many fans who grew up with it who literally started with like the 3rd episode of whatever they happened to catch on TV.
Yeah.
That literally anywhere you want to start has the potential to draw you in.
Totally.
Yeah. So I'm looking over my collection here that's sitting in front of me, and I'm trying to figure out where I definitely would or where I definitely would not start someone. And
where did you start yourself, Marcia? Like you saw the new series and then went back. Did you start with An Unearthly Child? Like
I did. I started with an Unearthly Child.
Okay.
And then went like through the snippets of the Lost in Time collection.
Yep.
So there were like pieces, there were like single episodes of stories in Lost, and it didn't matter to me. It was all through this show that I had come to love.
I was just going to say, would you recommend that? Because you clearly were wanting, it seems like, to consume from the beginning as much as you could, everything that was there to consume. Like for someone who maybe would feel the same, like show me everything. Like would you recommend doing that? Like literally, like, okay, here's the beginning, and then here's everything that exists, whether it's an orphaned episode, a full story, whatever. Like, would you recommend doing that?
Again, I think it definitely depends on whether the person I'm trying to draw in has similar proclivities. If they were like me and were a completionist and wanted to see it all, then yeah, it's a great way. You can see how the show evolves over time. You can see when they decide to bring things in. You can see that historic moment with the first regeneration and how it wouldn't have worked if Troughton hadn't been so boopin' brilliant.
Yep.
And you can kind of see how, well, preaching to the choir. So I really think that there's pretty much any Doctor you could find a story that would work to draw someone in. And again, different target audience, different option.
Well, yeah, and like Chris, you said, don't start someone with the Sixth Doctor, but I would argue that, especially with season 23, because it's a season-long arc, it starts off with the Doctor as confused as anyone else who's never seen the show before. You meet a new companion halfway through, new to him, sort of new to him because it's his future, certainly new to us as viewers. And that season-long arc is what you see in modern TV today. So again, to your point, Marcia, like if it's depending on their proclivities, like if there's someone who's really a big consumer of modern TV, that could actually work because it's color, it's it's very 80s, and you don't necessarily have to know anything, because it's all sort of explained to you, like, you've done things that we think you should be on trial for, here's your trial. And then, you know, the story unfolds that way. Now, of course, you know, it's maybe an odd framing device, but I think, you know, it could work. Now, would, I don't know, season 26 work? You know, the end of the classic run? Maybe not as well, but you've got Ace, and you've got this mysterious seventh Doctor. So that's another thing that could hook people in, like the unknown, because again, viewers who maybe were seeing it for the first time way back in the, you know, the late 80s might have been wondering the same thing, like, where is this going? Just like someone who's never seen the show before in 2021 and is trying, you know, to get started.
Yeah, and I think, you know, you can jump around too. I'm also a completionist, but when I went back to watch Classic Who, I just Googled what Classic Who Doctor do Americans like the most.
Really?
I got Tom Baker, so I was like, cool, I'm gonna start with Robots of Death. Great. I like this guy. I like Leela. Cool. I'll keep watching Tom Baker. I'm out of Tom Baker. Time for John Pertwee. I guess I'll skip to Ace. And I just I did the Doctors in order, but I went back and forth in eras.
So you do like fourth Doctor, like part of the fourth Doctor's era, then a different part of the fourth Doctor, then a different part of the fourth Doctor, and then do another Doctor. Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, what it reminds me of is the DVD release order, actually, because Jeff, you mentioned Dalek Invasion of Earth.
Yep.
Robots of Death. I felt like they really did a pretty good job at the very beginning when they were putting out the DVDs to release those stories that could introduce somebody to that to that Doctor.
Yeah, that's a really good call.
When I wrote about the series for the AV Club, my editors actually told me, don't go in order, jump around, because, and I thought that was a good idea too, because we had a better chance of introducing everything as quickly as possible that way. And there's so I think there's a good argument for that. And if you've got BritBox, you know, you can dive in anywhere you want to, and then jump around.
And Gabby, you mentioned like you saw some curated New Who, and then you watched the Sarah Jane Adventures, and then went to Classic Who, which I think is interesting because you could oh, sorry, go ahead. It was New Who first, and then it
was curated New Who, all of New Who, simultaneously Sarah Jane Adventures and Classic Who.
Okay. Do you feel like Sarah Jane, like, did that prepare you in any way for Classic Who? Because, you know, she's a classic companion. You've got, well, at least some of the time you have a robot dog, which could seem super cheesy, but everybody loves canine. So did that help prepare you for what you ultimately ended up seeing classic wise?
I really enjoyed both Classic Who and the Sarah Jane Adventures, but I feel like they are very different genres. Classic Who is very much like serial TV of its time, and Sarah Jane Adventures is very much modern children's show, complete with aliens exploding into goop and a lot of like So, I mean, I guess they're serial in the sense that they are kind of they're all divided into two-parters, so they're a little bit shorter, and they've got that going for them. But I think stylistically they're very different. I mentioned Lord of the Rings earlier, just because that was kind of the opposite for me. As a high schooler and a college student, I could not read Lord of the Rings. There was just a slog. And then I got into Classic Who, and I returned to Lord of the Rings, and I was like, these 3 pages where Tolkien describes the landscape is like when the camera pans for 3 minutes past the beach. I can just relax, and instead of trying to anticipate like next shot, I can just be like, and this is where we're at now. These are the facial expressions of the characters I care about. I can analyze all this body language. You just kind of slow yourself down and put a new lens on like how to watch TV.
Well, yeah, and I think it's interesting because of the connection to the Sarah Jane Adventures. Like, it reminds me, like, you know, Bill and I have a friend who started watching Doctor Who because he saw the Fox, you know, TV movie in 1996 on broadcast. I know someone who came to Doctor Who through Torchwood because she saw that with no knowledge of Doctor Who, saw Torchwood and then was like, oh, what's this? What's the antecedent for this? I want to see more of that. So I think let's, you know, not forget that could be another sort of like sideways way in, like, you have the classic series, which of course is what we're talking about, but then maybe a spinoff could be the way to get them in. I would argue, like,
so Canine and Company then.
Canine and Company, maybe the Australian Canine show maybe not so much, because it's not very good. But yeah,
we
K9
were actually
Company could be
talking
really
about.
good.
That's funny. That how often does the Australian Canine show come up? We were talking about it before you joined.
Not that
terrible.
often. It's because it's not that, but it could be really good for a really young audience. And then you could segue them into Sarah Jane Adventures, because then you get to see a little bit more K9, and then you could segue them into Classic Who. You know, the possibilities are, you know, endless.
I think you can just put kids straight to the Sarah Jane Adventures and
That's true.
skip the Australian K9.
Honestly, I haven't watched all of the Australian K9. I've watched the first few episodes. I own it like a good completionist. I do own it. But have I watched the whole thing? Absolutely not, because it's just not very. And the fact that it's made for younger children, notwithstanding, like I wouldn't have any problem with that if it was still good. And it's just not.
Yeah.
So
no, Sarah Jane Adventures is very clearly made for kids, but adults can still enjoy it because the writing and the acting are still fantastic.
Yes.
Not say the same thing for Australian K9.
No, that's true.
As long as we're on this subject, we've started to get a couple of questions in the comments, and let me bring up one of them here. Jason says, do you think there's a difference between trying to get an adult to watch classic Doctor Who versus showing classic Doctor Who to kids?
Yes.
I'll just share my own experience first. I've got 2 7-year-olds, and they insisted actually on starting with the first Hartnell. I tried jumping them forward. I think the first one I showed them was the Time Warrior, the John Pertwee one, and they liked it, but they said no. It doesn't start here. Let's go back. And they liked the first Doctor. Okay, we ended up skipping forward midway through his second season and started with Troughton. They loved Patrick Troughton. And then we got up to season 7, which was probably a mistake for 7-year-olds anyway. I think that one is a little too scary. We got to Inferno, and that was like hitting a brick wall. So we're having a Doctor Who pause for a little while until one of them is less scared of zombies. But the black and white era didn't seem to be a problem for them. They don't know anything about pacing. They don't have any expectations. They love like Avatar: The Last Airbender and stuff like that, but they were totally fine with an old style show.
So this is interesting. This is interesting because Chris, you have twins, and then Bill and Marcia are also parents of twins. So I'd be very interested in general, not twin specific, but like introducing, I don't know how old, I know how old Bill's are. I'm not sure how old yours are, Marcia, but like introducing them, whether they're, kids or not, like what that was like. Cause that's a really interesting story, Chris, like what they responded to and what they didn't. I think season 7, that's probably a wise observation. Like I can see how that wouldn't be great for 7-year-olds. But I could see it for like, Bill's kids who are teenagers, like maybe they'd respond to that better or differently.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, would you call it a twin dilemma?
Oh boy.
Somebody had to say it.
What's funny is I thought about what you were saying when you were talking about the Sarah Jane Adventures, because my kids were born in 2005, so they were really little when the Sarah Jane Adventures started, and I showed them Sarah Jane Adventures because it's for kids. It's perfect. That show's really scary. If you're a really little kid, the monsters jump out like at the screen. It's like designed to scare you. It's really like startling, and I was like worried. So we moved over to Doctor Who. That was because Doctor Who, the new Who, isn't like season 7 like you were talking about, Chris. It isn't like Inferno where it takes 2 or 3 episodes before you even know what the story is. It's pretty fast paced, and the Doctor's a lot of fun for the most part. I don't know. But then, like you said too, my kids are accustomed to watching black and white because they're my kids.
100%.
There's going to be black and white on the TV. It's just how it's got to be.
Yeah.
My girls are just a year younger than Bill's kids. They're 14 now, and they used to come past when I was watching classic episodes to, take notes so I could review them for my blog. And, when they were 7 or 8, they would like sit and watch for a few minutes, and then they decided they weren't up for that and they wanted to go away because that was just a little too scary. And so that for a long time, they're just like, nah, that's probably not for me. But then a couple of years ago, I actually got them into the modern series. I'm like, just watch one episode with Mama and make me happy, and you don't have to watch any more after that if you don't like it, but I think you would like this one. And so I had them watch the pilot with me. The
pilot as in the first episode of Doctor Who, or the pilot as in Peter Capaldi?
The pilot as in the introduction of Bill.
Got it. Okay, yes.
So they watched that with me and they really liked it, and they kept watching. And so then I was able to get them more into the modern stuff, and we watched most of that together. But they were also interested in some of the other doctors, and so I have showed them things from most of the other doctors, just kind of off and on, and they have pretty much liked all of it, even like Peladon, like the miners' strike. They're into it.
The badger hair.
I'm like,
yeah.
It just goes to show you can start anywhere.
Yep, you really can.
So,
I mean, Peladon's a strong story.
Well, the first one is. The second one is.
Yeah,
the first one. That's true.
Yeah, Monster is less so.
Agreed.
Yeah. I mean, I like them both.
I mean, also Peladon is full of funny looking monsters.
Mm-hmm.
What more do you want?
That's actually why we watched it, because of the Gatus episode that it was
Alpha Centauri.
Yeah, when Alpha Centauri, and I was all like, oh yay, Alpha Centauri, and they're like, what are you on about? So I'm like, well, we'll just watch this one and see what happens.
I hope that you really highlighted the fact that Usain Churchman, who is 90-something years old, came back who did the voice in Curse and Monster, and came back and is still alive to do it in that modern episode, which is so amazing to me.
Yes, I did highlight that.
Good. I hope they appreciated it. They better have.
It's these days.
They at least knew I was excited about it. So
good.
We got another question from Spinster Inked. Any advice for completionists who, on the one hand, really want to see all the Doctor Who, but on the other hand, just can't stomach the rampant sexism of the first Doctor era? It's a struggle. What do you guys think?
Well, I think, like Gabby said, it when you actually do watch it, it isn't nearly as bad as you're expecting. Mm-hmm. The one thing I would say is Susan is a bit of a tough watch. She's not a strong character, and it can be a little bit difficult. But
for me, it's more the first Doctor than Susan, because Susan's kind of, Barbara, but like she's 15, so I cut her some slack. Yeah. But the first Doctor does have some gross comments, and I kind of have it on two levels. I have the reality level where I'm like, it was being made in an earlier time. William Hartnell was kind of trash, and the show got better. And then in my constant fix-it-fic making head, I'm like, the Doctor's had to run away from home. He's super traumatized. He doesn't have any friends. He's picked up a lot of bad messaging from Earth, and he's just in a bad place right now, and he's not being his best Time Lord, but he's going to get better. So I kind of just try to hold that in my head of like, the show we love is made by imperfect people, and also the ability of your inner self to fanfic away the difficulties is endless.
I think
that's true.
I agree with you completely. One of the things about that first season of Doctor Who especially is that there is a real question about whether the Doctor is the villain of the series or the hero of the series. And that's reminding me now that even the creators of the show didn't know at the time. They had a plan. I don't know how long this lasted before filming actually took place, but one of the original ideas was that the Doctor was on the run because he had intended to like wipe out his home planet or something like that, or destroy their future. And that he would end up being like Ian and Barbara would have to put a stop to that. And then I guess in theory, Ian and Barbara would then have the TARDIS and go around in time and space, which is definitely a place the show could have gone in those first couple of seasons if Hartnell had gotten sick a year earlier than he did and had to step away earlier, and they hadn't come up with the idea of regeneration. It definitely could have become the Ian and Barbara show.
Marcia, I'd love to hear. I mean, we heard what Gabby had to say. I'd love to hear your take on, you know, the sort of the role of women and the sexism in, you know, early. Well, I say early Doctor Who, really all of Doctor Who, but particularly the early stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I did a lot of the, you know, holding the story apart from the creators kind of thing that I did compartmentalize sometime. But I would say as for advice for watching, one other option aside from having an excellent, you know, fix-it fanfic brain engaged, is if it's on a more practical side, you could have one of your friends who already knows these stories and how they go, or somebody else who is willing to do it for you and look through it first, do you know, does the dog die version for you,
right?
And go through and say, okay, there's going to be this and this and this in these episodes. So this is what to look out for if it's not something you can handle, or if you need time. You know, that could be another way to approach it. If you know it, I find if I know exactly what's coming, I can deal with it better. The things that bother me. So that's another.
Yeah, and I think there's things. Totally. I think there's things, and there must be a website, you know, there's a website, I think it literally is doesthedogdie.com, like, you know, something like that. So there's probably some Who version of that out there. But I think that the good thing is about, especially the earliest, you know, Doctor Who is, you know, it was produced by a woman, you know, Verity Lambert was there from the jump, you know, producing it. So at least, you know, that it was in her hands. Now, of course, whatever politics might have been limiting her, there certainly weren't, you know, women directors or writers, unfortunately. But if you look at like someone like Barbara, who was like kicking ass and taking names, like, you know, she stood her ground against Hartnell. Like when you look at the Daleks, certainly the Edge of Destruction, like, you know, she literally yells at him, like, you should be down on your knees thanking us. Like, you know, she does not take his crap, essentially. So I think there's moments like that. And then the Aztecs, same thing. Like, you know, she's like, I'm Yetaxa now. I'm in charge. So you can step away, little man. So I think, you know, is that more the exception than the norm? Unfortunately, yes, I think it is. But I think that you can at least find moments like that to hang on to at least hook you in. And to your point, Marcia, maybe those are the only ones you watch, you know, because you'll certainly get a good cross section by seeing stories that have some good, you know, I'd hate to say female representation because unfortunately there's never that many female characters, but at least we get to see some. You have Barbara there throughout the whole of the first couple of years, so at least you've got a really good, you know, good representation in her a lot of the time. But yeah, I don't know that there's necessarily like a good answer to some of that. I mean, we talk about it a lot with like Polly and, you know, making the coffee and things like that. But when you think about Polly making the coffee in Moonbase and she sort of shunted away to do that, she's like, well, it's the sugar, duh. Like, you know, she's the one who comes up with that. So again, you hook onto those more positive aspects. And yes, that's probably, I think, the silver lining in an otherwise maybe, you know, gross cloud. And I think to your point, Gabby, like, you know, some people that made the show are just, or were in the show maybe, are just, you know, trash when you think about it from a modern sensibility of like, you know, they didn't believe in whether it was like, you know, representation for women or people of color or whatever. But at least there are those moments to, I guess I'd say, to celebrate. Although they are more few and far between sometimes.
I think the classic series, like the wider culture around it at the time, it was having these constant struggles between trying to be more feminist and having elements involved in the creation, including, unfortunately, some of the most talented writers and producers who were maybe on the more reactionary side. You have some great characters that they sometimes did great things with, and sometimes they didn't. Leela started out super, super strong, maybe didn't end so well, where she just gets married off,
Yeah, with no context.
Yeah,
like,
and,
some more chemistry with Rodan.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah, she absolutely had more chemistry with Rodan. Like that, I would have bought into. Like if she runs away with Rodan, I am 100% there for it. But yeah, that's a whole nother panel.
Yeah, but I mean, they, to their credit, you've got Barbara, you've got Liz, you've got Joe, you've got Sarah Jane, you've got Leela, you've got both Romanas, and there are time and again they introduce really strong female characters, and sometimes they get a lot to do in an episode, and then they don't always handle them super well. But there's great examples for all of those characters of them, being really strong and being really an important part of the narrative, not just letting them be a doctor's show.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think engaging in fandom can be another way to kind of along his line of like practicality of like you have to deal with the sexism in the show and the racism and the colonialism, but transformative fan works are things that people can create and that you can create, you can put out into the world, and you can be like, and that can be a way of reclaiming it, whether it's a fan fiction or a gift set or a video. Like these are ways that we can say like, this is also for me, and even if I don't see me the way I want to in this, I'm gonna make you see me the way I want to in this.
Yes, I think that's great.
Yep.
I can't do that. Like I'm not a writer in any sense of the word, but I love that people do that. I think that that's a great way to, like you said, reclaim it. Like this is still my show, and I'm going to show you how this could be even better with great female representation or great BIPOC representation or whatever. So I love that people are doing that. What about you, Bill? What do you think about all of this?
Bravo! I don't know. Yeah, that's great. I don't know. I think it's I mean it's a tricky business from episode to episode. You never know what you're going to get for sure. So I don't know. If you go in expecting it the worst, I think then you're liable to be have your expectations exceeded.
Right. I think
I feel like this is the second time I've weighed in on this topic, and I'm trying, and it sounds like I'm the guy going, "There's no sexism in Doctor Who," and I really don't want to be that guy.
Yeah. But I think you contextualize it. I mean, I think it was you, Gabby, that talked about like viewing it in the context of when it was made, and I wish there was a better answer to that. But I mean, you also added colonialism to it, which I think is really important in the context of a show made, in the UK. Because sometimes they're like, hey, the white UK British people are here to save you, not using those words, but those actions, like, I'll save your planet or whatever. And that was, it's an unfortunate fact, but again, we process it, and we either enjoy it, we ignore it, we change it through, fan fiction or whatever. Like you can do all of those things. You can take it back that way.
Yeah. Kind of to bring it back to the earlier question of episodes you wouldn't start with, I would say definitely don't start with Talons of Wang Chang.
Yeah.
In terms of plot and structure, it's a beautifully plotted and structured story.
Yeah.
It's racist as hell.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just thinking of that exact episode. Good point.
And the mutants for the colonialism.
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, at least you have a prominent speaking, Black character in that story, which is good. But you're right, it's all colonialism. Like, we will come and save you, mutants. You know what I mean? Like, it's there in the title. It's called The Mutants. So yeah, that's unfortunate.
Doesn't help that character's name happens to be Cotton.
Cotton, I know. I know. At least though, I believe this is correct. Like, the character wasn't. They made the character black. It wasn't originally intended to be a black character, and they should have had the wherewithal to maybe change the name when they decided to cast a black actor. But it's unfortunate.
I think the John Pertwee era especially had a long proclivity for trying to engage in hot topic political stuff at the time. Like, you know, I think with the mutants, they were trying to have an episode about colonialism.
Yeah.
And just didn't really, especially now that we've, you know, that 50 years have gone by and so much has evolved in our culture, it doesn't work the same way. Plus, I don't think they necessarily knew what to think, or what the right answer was, and they weren't necessarily landing in the right spot. Like the Green Death has a really strong environmental beginning, and then it kind of just loses the plot.
Yeah.
As far as that part of it goes, it's a great thriller, but it doesn't really handle the theme, in my opinion, all that well through the end of the actual story.
I think colonialism is an interesting lens to watch Doctor Who in general, because the one of the things they established right off the bat is you can't change history, not one line, but it's only just the history of England, really, that they care about. They'll go to another planet and change everything. They don't care.
Right.
Doesn't
Fixed
matter.
moments in time only apply to Earth, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah, I give the mutants and Kinda a little credit for trying to engage with the issues. So I'm like, they tried. They made a start. Got the ball rolling. We'll eventually get there.
Yeah. Well, at least with the mutants, like at the end of it, you've got like Super Kai, who's like, what? What are you going to do? Because now I have like superpowers and I can do whatever I want to you. So, you've got the ones trying to be sort of colonialized winning in the end. So that's good.
So the panel is how to introduce people to Doctor Who. Is the mutants a good one or not a good one? I'll say to go back to that topic though, of what to introduce people with. I don't think I ever said what my choice was, which is I think people always laugh when I say it, but it's the Five Doctors, because I think it's a cool way to introduce people to something. If you watch it, you've never seen Doctor Who, you'd be like, I have no idea what's going on. Yeah. And I think it might encourage people to go back and watch.
It's a charcuterie, you've got like all these different doctors, different companions, you've got a bunch of different monsters. Like, it certainly sets up like, okay, these are all the same person. They've traveled with all different types of people. This is their home planet. I think that becomes pretty obvious even to someone who hasn't watched it. So yeah,
Susan sprains her ankle and the first Doctor tells Tegan to make tea. It's all there.
Yeah.
But
falls down a very gently sloping cliff.
The less said about that, the
That's
better.
Right.
But you've got, in that case, like, the first Doctor says to Tegan, like, get some refreshments, and she's like, hang on a minute. And then the fifth Doctor's like, Turlo, go with. So at least he's like making, this is not a woman's work, a woman's job. Like, you go with her, Turlo, to do it. But yeah, you're right. Like, that's you've got some of those tropes in there as well. But at least, plus side, that sets you up for some of the things that you will see when you go back and watch more of the show. It's maybe it's I don't know if I'd say it's exaggerated, but it is stuff that happens in the show. So, Polly was asked to make the coffee sometimes, and then the first Doctor said the same thing to Tegan, and then she's like, no, I don't want to do that. But then, at least Turlo does it with her.
And then also, because it is such a nostalgia-based story, when you get the first Doctor's introduction, they put him in, like, it's not filmed in black and white, but the sets are basically black and white, and it's designed to look like the the city of Skaro in the original Daleks.
Yeah.
The second Doctor starts in more of a spooky, like underground web of fear sort of thing. The third Doctor starts with a big action sequence.
Yep.
And so they're really because they were trying to recapture for nostalgic reasons the feel of the old shows. It also helps set up this is what this and this and this are going to be like.
Yeah. Well, I especially appreciate the. Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, unironically, it's my favorite episode. Nostalgia is my kryptonite. But I do think it is just like, I don't know if I would have it be a person's first episode, but I do think that charcuterie element that was mentioned is very accurate. You get a little taste of everybody. It's a fun romp with some fun monsters. And, even though it is mostly very extremely 100% silly, there are moments of genuine emotion, like Jamie.
Yeah, that's true. And even, Liz and Mike, the illusions are sort of like, oh, wow, that's, how do you know who we are sort of thing. Like, and then you might be inspired to think like, oh, what's that about? I'm going to go see what led to that. So, and Chris, what you were saying about sort of evoking the era of each Doctor is they're sort of set up in the 5 Doctors. I especially love with the first Doctor, he says to Susan, like, I'm going to push the Dalek down that alley when that alley is I'm going to push it about 1.5 foot that way. And then we're going to duck because it's going to shoot. And that's exactly how I think about the Keys of Marinus or the first Dalek story where you have, painted backdrops, needing to simulate continuing hallways. It's perfect. I've never thought about that before, but that's exactly, whether deliberate or not, that's perfectly representative. Like that alley is 1 foot that way. And that's about how big Lime Grove was. So it's perfect. And we get a Corey. So that works too.
I'm just looking at I wrote down a couple of questions for the panel in case we needed it. What do you guys think of we haven't really talked about the 7th Doctor very much. Do you think there's a particular, because I wouldn't necessarily go with the regeneration episode. In fact, in general, I think regeneration episodes are maybe, there's always a lot going on with, getting rid of the old and establishing the new.
I thought you were gonna say that because that story isn't thought of.
Oh, it's
very
terrible.
Highly general.
It's my least favorite episode.
So here's the thing. It's not terrible, and it's one of my favorites. And I showed it to my kids, and they loved it. For kids, that is actually a great episode. It's really fun and brightly colored, and doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't have to. Yeah,
you're right. Yeah, I think that can be fun for kids. Yeah, and I think it cuts both ways. To your point, Chris, like someone would easily be like, "What's happening?" But also, like, you wouldn't even necessarily understand that, like, Sylvester, Colin Baker is regenerating into Sylvester McCoy in the first, opening sequence there. But what a good discussion point. Plus, you've got another, Time Lord in the Ronnie. You've got kind of badass, but a little bit silly looking monster in the Tetraps. You've got a quarry. So you've got sort of all the elements. So again, like, you could make the argument, like, and it's, I don't know how old your kids were when they saw that, Bill, but at least that's a good litmus test for, how is this really going to be a good jumping off point for somebody?
Yeah, I hadn't considered it from that aspect. That's a good point.
Plus, there's not as much of the 7th Doctor era in terms of number of episodes because the seasons are 14 episodes apiece. So you can at least breeze through it a little bit more quickly, and you've got, especially once we get into 25 and season 26. I don't know if I'd say a return to form, but certainly some really interesting stories with a strong female character in Ace, who the bonus of Ace is Ace always gets her own companion. She gets Xiao Yang in Battlefield, and she gets Kara in Survival. So you've got that sort of not the sort of fam feeling of the current Doctor, but you get the sort of extended family feeling or extended friends feeling of somebody who the companion gets to have as their companion throughout the story, which didn't really happen previously, but is kind of a modern, more of a modern sensibility. So, easy to think like not by default, but there could be something there with the 7th Doctor's era.
I think,
and
please go ahead.
Sorry, who? Yeah, And the writer for Ace, one of the writers, Rona Monroe, confirmed that she was writing Ace as gay, and all of those companions of the week are Ace's girlfriends. So if you want some queer subtext, extra texty, that's a great place to start.
Yep, I'm here for all of that. Plus, Rona Monroe, who wrote Survival, still stands as the only writer who wrote for both the classic and the new series. So, so that's another kind of entry point. Plus the fact that the story she wrote, Survival, is the last story of the classic era and has certainly, we talked in the, Marcia was there and Bill was there for the TV movie panel, like the line you can draw from Survival as the last classic story to the TV movie in 1996 to Rose in 2005. So you've got, again, a more modern sensibility in Survival. So yeah, that's a really good call. I like that.
I think another thing I like about the Ace series, connecting to the modern series, is that unlike a lot of the rest of Classic Who, a lot of Ace's stories are really about Ace, not really about the Doctor, but there are things that she goes through and learns something or changes, and sometimes the Doctor is deliberately taking her to that place in order to help her get through something. Which is a very modern series way of handling things.
Marcia, you were going to say something?
No, well, I was going to say, I think that if I were starting someone in the 7th Doctor, I would start with Remembrance of the Daleks, because Ace gets to beat up a Dalek with a baseball bat. You can't beat that.
Yeah, that's true.
Not to beat a dead horse, but I think we've now mentioned most of the first DVD releases. That was the first one from McCoy, I think.
Was it?
Well, and 5 Doctors was the first one altogether, so maybe just do that. There you go. So, there's your list.
We should have just referenced that in the first place. You're right, Bill.
For everybody out there who still has a working DVD player.
That's probably all of us. I know. I have. Well, a Blu-ray player on every.
I'm actually
TV in the
sitting
house.
right next to one. Right here.
Perfect.
Of course,
obviously, we all have this physical media. I mean, you can see Bill's behind him. Like, we need some way to play it.
Larry Bartell says, "Not to beat a dead Dalek with a baseball bat" should be your phrase.
Oh, instead of to beat a dead horse. Yes, that is what I said.
Missed opportunity there, Bill. Next time.
We're getting down to the last couple of minutes. Does anyone in the audience have any questions before we have to wrap it up? You can type into the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and speak up, feel free.
Or any final thoughts from anyone in the room, virtual room?
Yeah, I don't think so. But I did see a question go past earlier that I wanted to address. Somebody said something about, although it's a panel block classic, what about new Who fans who just don't get it at all? And
thank you. I forgot about that question.
Yeah, I want to say that although obviously all of us here really love Classic Who, and I would advocate for everyone at least trying some Classic Who. If it's not for you, it's not for you. And that's okay too. We all have parts of the show that we love. We all have parts of the show that we like less well. So if you give it a try, if you have somebody recommend one to you based on what it is that you like, and they find one that you think you'll really like, and you try it out and you're still like, nope, that's okay. That's okay too. We love Classic. We'd love you to love Classic, but if it's not for you, that's perfectly fine. You're still every bit as much of a fan as anybody else.
Yeah, we'd love to assimilate you into being like we. But if you just like the new stuff, that's okay. You're missing out, but that's okay. More for us to watch. But I think the great thing about Doctor Who is that there's 50. It's what is this year? It's 58 years of history to consume. And whether you're I was thinking about this earlier. I think when you were saying something, Gabby, about watching the original, Classic Who, and then I think about and then we also have, the Target novelizations of those classic stories, and then now we have the audio narrations of the books of the novelizations of those classic stories. Like, we'll just keep consuming forever. We'll whatever's there, we'll consume. So there's something for everybody, whether it's classic, it's a spinoff, it's New Who, it's books, it's Big Finish. You know, there's so much you could get into. Like, you do you, but to Marcia's point, we'd love to have you in the classic Who fold. Give it a try, you know, sample, take the charcuterie, see what you like. And if you don't like any of it, they're still making the show, so keep watching that. That works too.
Yeah, I mean, there's so just sticking with the television series, there's 10,000 hours or more, probably more,
easily
to watch.
Easily.
But then, like you say, you've got the Target novelizations. You've got 2 other completely different lines of novels. You've got the comic books. You've got the Big Finish audios. You've got various fan spin-offs, some of which are semi-canonical. It's science fiction. It's science fiction fandom that just keeps generating itself the way all of this stuff does, and it could possibly never end. Maybe the question is, how much should you try to consume? Where do you want to try and fit all that in your brain? Because you've got only so much space for that.
I have space for everything Doctor Who.
I think you got to remember, fandom is supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sometimes we can get into a place, especially if you're a completist like me, where you're just like,
yeah,
I gotta get it all. I gotta get it all. But just like stuffing yourself on a charcuterie, at a certain point you have to stop before you get a stomach ache. Like, I'm like 63 episodes into the main range of Big Finish, and that's barely scratching the surface.
Yes.
Like, it will always be there, and I think you just got to be like, what way of consuming this is a healthy, fun way that you can do this.
Yes, as we learned from Tegan from Auntie Vanessa via Tegan in Resurrection of the Daleks, if you stop enjoying it, give it up. Like, if you try the first Doctor and you don't like the first Doctor, try the second, try the third, try the seventh. Try any of them, because there's plenty to watch. There's plenty to consume. I mean, you mentioned, Chris, some of the spin-off, sort of unofficial Wilderness Years stuff. I think it was you, Gabby, that I saw in one of the photos from the first or second year. You were dressed as Probe, the Zero Imperative, a real-time spin-off from the 90s. Like, and that's just one of so many you could be consuming. And you're 63 stories into the main range, I think, of Big Finish. So you have about 200 more main range stories and 104 spin-off series to listen to. So plenty of content out there to consume, for sure.
I see that it is a little past 5:30, but Larry tells me that we're into a break period, so I think we can keep this going a little bit if people want to. But maybe I should read the announcement real quick. If you're currently watching this, please like this video and subscribe to our page. Console Room is happening virtually January 15 through January 17. Find out all the things that are happening by visiting our webpage, www.console-room.com.
Also, I have to highlight the fact that Larry said in the chat, we're saying charcuterie a lot, and he said charcuterie. I can't believe we missed that trick there. So remember that for the future. Charcuterie.
Charcuterie.
Right.
I think that's a great ending note.
Yeah, I mean, does it get much better than that? I don't know. Yeah. Maybe if we watch the 5 Doctors.
What was your very first, maybe we already talked about this, but what was your very first complete Doctor Who that you watched? For me, I'd mentioned watching the last bit of Seeds of Doom. The first one that I actually watched all the way through was The Ark in Space. And I think that's what really hooked me. Because before it was just kind of a vague memory of what the heck was that I was watching. But the actual storyline in space made me go, wow, this is really cool. And come back to this.
Robots of Death.
Child.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could remember what mine was. Like, I was one of my, I have 3 older brothers, and one of them is into Doctor Who, and he watched it. He knows his first story was Mask of Mandragora. I honestly do not know what mine was, because I do not remember a time in my life where I wasn't watching Doctor Who. So I wish I knew. I always claim it must be a 5th Doctor story, simply because I that's my favorite Doctor, and I love that era. And Tegan's my favorite companion, but I honestly have no idea what my first story was, because they start when my memory starts, basically. So it's, yeah, I wish I knew.
Mine was the twin dilemma. I just was so enamored with that show that, no, I'm totally kidding. I have no idea. I don't remember what I had for breakfast. Yeah.
Do you remember anything about your first, way back in 1982? Do you remember anything about your first time watching? What Doctor?
I mean, it was Tom Baker.
Sure.
That's what drew me to it, was definitely Tom Baker, his character. Couldn't tell you any more than that,
That's probably a lot of US fans experiences.
I know for my wife it was the Peter Davisons. She's the same age as me, but she got into it a few years after I did. So
yeah, I wish I could remember. But then I can just say, like I said, it starts when my memory starts. So I've just always watched it.
I know Marcia's first was An Unearthly Child.
Yep.
I really like that, because the first show, An Unearthly Child, the first episode, is fantastic. We all know that. And the second one is terrible. It's just congratulations for sticking it out.
And then the third one rewards you, though, because Edge of Destruction is.
That's a whole different can of, yeah. It's so.
Oh, I see. I didn't mean you're on the third story. Yeah, I'm actually meant the literal second episode where they're fighting with cavemen and that. But you're right. Daleks is kind of long and ponderous too. It's a bit of a slog. The show had a hard time getting its footing, I think, but that's fun to watch too.
Well, I'm getting a message here that maybe this is a good place to wrap it up. If anyone wants to keep going, maybe we could find a Discord channel to keep talking in.
All the Discord channels.
Okay. Is there a particular one that you would recommend that we go to, or
maybe the bar?
Okay.
Probably the bar, I would think, or maybe Con-Suite, but people might be still talking about pancakes there, which just make us all hungry. So, yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks everybody. I hope this was a good conversation for everyone, and had a great time. So we will see you around the con. My next panel is the season 8 panel at 8:30. Do you guys have stuff coming up that you want to plug quick before we head out?
This is my last one. Well, I think some pre-recorded ones that Bill and I did are yet to come, but I think this is my last live one. So, but lots of good stuff. And since it's virtual, many of them are being recorded. So you might be watching this 5 years in the future, in which case, hello from 2021. I hope the vaccinations all worked and we're all out in the world again.
Last live panel for the day, but I got a pre-recorded Elizabeth Sladen panel later. So if you want to come hear me squee about her.
Cool.
Yeah. I have a panel tomorrow at noon about the New Year's special, Revolution of the Daleks.
Yeah. I'll have to go to that one.
At some point tomorrow, I'm going to talk about Star Wars. That's all I know.
So a regular day then.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's part of the panel, or?
Yeah, I got no panels. No, I'm just, at some point.
He's going to talk about, yeah. It's true.
All right.
All right. Cool. Well,
Thanks,
we'll wrap
everybody.
it up there. Thank you. See you guys around the con.
Thanks all.
Take care.